It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Once again, injuries seem to dominate the headlines in the CFL. It's sadly part of football, and we can go up and down the ladder as to who's not going to be available. But we typically focus on star players, and Drew Brown doesn't look like he's going to be back in the lineup this week. It's hard to say how far along he is in his recovery, but a little shovel pass, and the next thing you know, you're out.
A tough one for Drew Brown, and he's been banged up the last couple of seasons. I think this is the third time he's been knocked out of games this season already. He missed a big chunk early on with a hip injury. Looks to be leg related. Yet again, he was kind of favoring a knee. Tough break for the Red Blacks. They have Dustin Crum as their number 2 guy who's been around for several seasons, has had many starts in the CFL already during that time as well. So not coming in raw, but a bit of a change in the offensive plan for the Red Blacks, at least for this week.
It's always been said, and it's a sad thing if you want to context it this way, but when you look at football, your most important asset is your availability. Once you make the team, you've got to be available to play. And Drew Brown has struggled to stay on the field. Last year, he was out with a concussion. That adds up to all kinds of changes with quarterbacking. We had Tyree Adams playing for a while. He's not available yet for Ottawa. So you're right. Dustin Crum is going to be the person who's going to have to carry this team. Now, he showed well enough against Winnipeg. Maybe that's enough to soothe some of the fears. Certainly he isn't the code breaker that Drew Brown is when he looks at a defense.
Although maybe he is against the Blue Bombers. For everything that Nathan Rourke has struggled to do against Winnipeg, Dustin Crum seems to have no problems. This is a game this past week where he led them back from a 17-point fourth quarter deficit. We saw that famously nicknamed the crumback last year as well, where he came from behind and beat the Bombers in overtime. This time they came up one play short, but he is comfortable with that offense and seems to have the Bombers figured out.
He does, but for the time being, they don't play the Bombers, and so he's got to do it against other teams. And I believe that game that you're referring to was actually 2 years ago. It was his rookie season with Ottawa that he came out and basically got thrust into an impossible situation. Others that have gone out, Dejon Brissett, we can talk about that hit that he took, DeMonte Coxie, landing on his head like that. And I know Terrell Ford is not a dirty player, but when you see a guy up going for a football like that, do you have to take the legs out and flip him? I just don't get that. To me, I think that deserves supplemental discipline. In fact, it deserved discipline on the moment. There's got to be a change in this understanding. Just because you're touching a football does not make you a protected player. You're unprotected. You don't know what's going on. Coxie's up in the air and gets flipped like that. Not intentional. I don't think Ford ever wanted to do that, but he did undercut him, and that's probably 99% of the time what's going to happen.
I agree with you. Tyrell Ford is a good enough defensive back that he could play the ball more in that situation than playing the legs and cutting underneath. It's a tough situation. It was a hard impact. Unfortunately for DeMonte Coxie, it was the way that he came down and really hit his head on the turf, knocked him out of the game. We hope the best for him as well. You hate to see these star players get knocked out for long term. Obviously, he was out of sorts from that hit, but it looks like he walked off under his own steam. It will take a little bit of recovery time, but hopefully not something long-term for Coxie.
For Dejon Brissett, who probably lucked out that he didn't get a severe injury from the hit that he took from Cordell Jackson. Now, Jackson, they will argue that he made contact closer to the hip, but the majority of the contact was at or below the knee when he went through him. And I think you've got to start changing that definition. It's not where you first touch the guy. It's where the multitude of impacts happen. Because if you ever watch a video of somebody slapping a wall. The hand hits it like 1,000 times. It doesn't hit it just once. And that's what's going on with this kind of impact. That body is coming, they're meeting, and then there's that residual pounding that goes on before the momentum carries Brissett down. He's not protected by any stretch because he's getting his head upfield, and they're saying, well, you got to turn faster. First things first, you got to catch the football. Then you got to start thinking about what's next. He didn't know that was about to happen. So how do you blame the victim for what happened?
We've seen great strides in player safety and in protecting players. It's not 100% effective yet, nor will it ever be in a contact sport like football. But you compare this type of play, and I'm talking about the roughing the passer calls as well. We saw a spearing penalty this past weekend for a 15-yard penalty. You compare that to the football of the 80s and 90s, where everybody on offense seemed to have been fair game to the defenders, and we had players getting blown up. You don't see it as often. They're putting steps in place, but I agree. I think the low hits need to be addressed more, as well as what they've done with the headshots. They've really focused on leading with the crown, spearing, roughing the passer with those sorts of situations. If you look at the rules of rugby, you're tackling between the waist and the shoulders. And that's the area of focus that you're less likely to get these kinds of injuries. When you target the legs and the knees, it's vulnerable. It's easy to do a lot of damage and unfortunately knock players out of the game.
You're exactly right. Back 50 years ago, 60 years ago in the 1960s and the 50s, guys had less padding, but they seemed to play longer. They seemed to survive. And why? Because there was sort of this understanding that you tackle, you just bring them to ground. You're not trying to blow them up. You're not trying to injure, hurt. You're trying to, well, maybe for some guys, they wanted to hurt the other guy. But for the most part, they did not want to get called for something unnecessary. With scores in that era a little bit lower than what they are now, guys were much more cognizant of penalties. The type of game you play two ways, you didn't have the energy to unload on anybody. Now it's this idea that you've got to keep your arms out of it, put your shoulder into it. That's going to protect you. I don't like this. Now, Micah Awe, that's Alexander Gagne, I believe, that was hit by him. And it was twice that Micah Awe came through with that helmet of his. The first time he missed. The second time he got him, and he knocked him unconscious. He was out. When you're turtling with your hands and then you're staggering to get up, you're in big trouble, and you need to be medically treated right away. Micah Awe, he is a tough player, but you don't need to lead with the crown. How many times in this podcast have we said we've got to eradicate that? And yet, here we go again.
And they've made changes in the offseason to implement automatic ejections with 25-yard penalties. They've put some steps in place, but I agree with you 100%. I think they need to look at the severity of these and make it more punitive to the player that initiates that contact. I'm fine with ejections for spearing. You look at the danger of that kind of tackle and what it can do to the other player's career. Get them to the locker room and sit out the rest of the game, and they start to reconsider how they're going about their profession.
Well, and lots will say it matters about the paycheck that you're going to give up on that night. Officials typically are hesitant to toss a guy unless there's something supremely egregious. But I don't know what's more egregious by knocking a guy out, by launching and giving him a crown of your helmet, a spearing penalty. Like, spearing to me should be a 25 and you're gone. End of story. Make it real simple. You spear, you're out of there. And that would simplify and quantify everything. No one would have any illusions about if Micah Awe should stay or shouldn't. No, he's gone. That's it. That's all there is to it.
I agree. They've made those steps with throwing punches or any kind of motion like a punch leads to an ejection. Now, a spearing penalty, as I said, should be major, and an ejection, a disqualification should be par for the course.
If you throw a punch, do you think that's going to be more damaging if the guy's still got his helmet on than a spearing? If a guy's coming at you, launching at 20 kilometers an hour and launching 220 pounds at you, which do you think is going to cause more damage, and why is it throwing a punch is more valuable in terms of a penalty assessment than spearing?
Keeping with the injuries, the Montreal Alouettes have lost their third starting quarterback of the season. Caleb Evans with a torn ACL is done for the season. Earlier last week, they moved McLeod Bethel-Thompson to the 6-game injured list with an elbow injury. Davis Alexander already on the 6-game with his second hamstring injury of the season. A pretty tough spot for the Alouettes. Now they've gone out, they've added recently Cameron Dukes and Shea Patterson to help shore up that quarterback situation. But this is not ideal for the Alouettes in any way. They've got some key guys on defense missing. That's been their strong suit. Now they're moving down the depth chart to number 4 at QB.
It's unbelievable that, what is it? I should say, and it's the 10th game of the season coming up for the Alouettes. In terms of their schedule, they're up to their 4th quarterback. That's unbelievable. That's a quarterback every 2.5 games. Davis Alexander, he's back at practice. How much he's practicing, I don't know, but he is listed back at practice. And in the 6th game, near the end of that 6th game, you can start to practice with the team at the end of it. You cannot dress for a game or anything like that, but you can sort of get yourself back into game shape, as it were. I don't know that he's going to be ready anytime soon. We've also seen that with Dalton Schoen, who's on the 6th game. He's coming back with the Blue Bombers and practicing again. You can only do that at the end. So the first 3-4 weeks, it's verboten, no chance. But when you come down to the end, because you got to get acclimatized again.
James Morgan came in relief of Caleb Evans last week, and I anticipate him being the starter this week. I don't believe that Dukes or Patterson have been there long enough yet to fully learn the system and be comfortable taking the field in that number 1 role. And James Morgan did okay. We'll get to his stats later on, but I thought, given the situation and the circumstances, he came in and did not look out of place.
He did well. I was surprised, actually, because a lot of times a guy coming into a situation like that, the Lions were going to start feasting on him. They were going to blitz and do everything they could to unsettle him. But he stood in and made a lot of right decisions and got the team moving. But the Alouettes have, as much as their quarterbacking woes are impacting them, their defense is hurting. Mustafa Johnson's still not back in the lineup, and that's a stud on the defensive line. You've got KB Nento, who may be coming back. Marc-Antoine Dequoy, nope, not anywhere for a while yet. Those are all stars that are not on your team. And you cannot tell me that a team losing all-star talent isn't impacted negatively, that, they should be able to withstand these hits because the roster is big enough. It doesn't work that way.
And regardless of the size of the roster, there was a lot of players getting carted off and helped off the field for the Montreal Alouettes in this game, not just the ones that we've mentioned so far. And you've also got Austin Mack, Tyson Philpott, James Letcher Jr. That's 3 starting receivers not in the lineup. This is adding up, and it's a tough situation for the Alouettes.
And with a home date coming up, what do you do? Jason Moss doesn't want to sit there and say, well, I guess we'll just have to wait a week. He wants to put up an effort against the Blue Bombers, but they're up against it. And Winnipeg, for their part, lucky them, they get to see a very depleted Montreal Alouette team at a time when they need wins. One is almost being handed to them, given what's going on in Montreal, that the Alouettes will make their way through it. But when and how, that's going to be the question. How deep into this schedule and where will they be in terms of the standings?
Keeping with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they have got some help with the defensive secondary. That's been a bit of a tough point for them. Bringing back veteran Demario Houston, as well as defensive back Russell Dandy, who was released during training camp with the Bombers. He's back in the lineup. That one doesn't raise a lot of eyebrows. Bringing Demario Houston in does, however. If you remember, he was released by the Calgary Stampeders due to some criminal allegations of domestic violence. Those charges have been dropped, and he has re-signed with Winnipeg. I'm not comfortable with this signing. I've got a lot of takes. I'm interested to hear what you have to say, and then I can chime in as both a Bomber fan and my thoughts for the league.
I was surprised that this happened. And in a press conference discussing this, Mike O'Shea, the head coach, said, need will never outweigh integrity. And one of the things that he kept pointing out was that while Demario Houston was in Winnipeg the last time, this was before he signed as an FA in Calgary, he was a model citizen. He did everything right, worked hard for the team, was an asset for everybody there. That's not the issue. It's what happens at home is the issue. He didn't talk about that. Now, everyone points to the fact that the charges were dropped, but they were dropped by his wife. There's a lot of speculation that she did so because A, he's the breadwinner. I mean, what does she do? She's going out on her own was very viable in her mind. It's really tough when she's the victim, has to make the choice and decides to drop the charges.
A couple of things really jump out to me in this situation. One is that the magistrate handling the case made note that despite dismissing this case, there has been a history of domestic violence between these two, with Demario Houston being the aggressor. There was also third-party investigation by the league that found Demario Houston was in violation of the league's gender-based violence initiatives. Those two are huge red flags. I think this is a bad look for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I understand from the football on-field product side of things, this is a position that you're looking to get help. This leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I don't like the signing. However, the league has seemed to determine a half season is about appropriate for what they deem punishment in these situations. If you look at Chad Kelly as the precedent, it has been set. He's allowed back in the league, has started games again. Demario Houston has missed half of a season. It wasn't an official suspension per se, but you look at all of the details of when the league mandated that the Stampeders release him, when he has now re-signed with Winnipeg, it's in that same window.
I think the Stampeders are following league dictates, but I don't believe that the Stampeders were necessarily told to do this, that they actually took it upon themselves to make that decision. It's interesting that you bring it up with the Chad Kelly thing, because here you've got another type of aggression against a female. He had to pay his dues. Now, O'Shea repeatedly said the CFL does a good job of vetting all of this stuff. They've gone through and checked it out. This charge may be expunged from his record. It may be taken all right away. If that's the case, then legally he is entitled to be employed in Canada. You can't stop him on that basis. Do you believe that a person can grow from that situation? Can Demario Houston, as we hoped with Chad Kelly, can they grow and be a better person, treat everyone around them better?
There's a saying that if somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And in these situations, I'm not 100% sure that they are going to be able to right the wrongs. You look at other situations in the league for other infractions, and I think of DUI charges. Both Winnipeg and Saskatchewan have had players of note. Jake Dolagala in Saskatchewan, Kenny Lawler in Winnipeg, were charged with driving under the influence. The teams and the players owned up to those situations. Kenny Lawler presented himself to the media in Winnipeg, admitted to his mistakes. The Bombers suspended him before the league even had a chance to take action. He vowed that he was going to be a better person, that you wouldn't have any of these disciplinary issues. That was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and he's right. That is not as egregious, in my opinion, as the situations that we're looking at with Chad Kelly and Demario Houston. It's a long road back. Frankly, what I've seen from Chad Kelly's social media, I'm not sure lessons have been learned. Demario Houston, maybe he'll be different, but he's got to prove me wrong.
An interesting story came out this week, and it actually started on August the 1st, where PETA, which is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, came out with a video from a slaughterhouse in Ohio. And what's the connection, you may ask? Well, this slaughterhouse also provides leather for Wilson, the exclusive provider of footballs to the CFL and the NFL. PETA got hidden camera footage. What they found did shock. They said it's not even up to the standards of Canadian rules or American rules in terms of how these cattle were meeting their ends. The argument from PETA is that to get footballs this way is unethical, and that because rugby has already found a way to get a synthetic football that they use, that the CFL and the NFL could move that direction as well. This is a very interesting tack that they're taking. And they're arguing per year that Wilson and other manufacturers will provide 700,000 footballs across North America, I guess Europe too. The number of cattle required is about 70,000 because of 10 per cow. You can get 10 cuts from each cow's leather available so that you can make 10 footballs. You do the math, it's pretty easy. What do you think of all this?
I'm not going to weigh in too deeply on this. I understand where PETA is coming from. The organization has done a lot of good for animal welfare throughout North America and around the world. Sometimes they can go a little extreme. And in this situation, they're talking about 70,000 head of cattle being slaughtered to provide footballs. That's a bit of a naive take. There's more being produced from each of those animals than just 10 footballs. And I think that's what we can't lose sight of as well. They're also a food source. There's many other things that are manufactured from leather and animal byproducts. You get into pet food, the list goes on and on. So it's a shocking number, and that's what they're going for, is the shock value of seeing that number. You talk about rugby having non-leather alternatives, and that's something that may be looked at by these leagues in the future. They've brought awareness to it, and that was the point of it. I guess more egregiously is the handling of these animals in these facilities, and are they being handled in a humane way? I guess that's more my concern than the actual using the leather to manufacture the footballs.
If you want to go see, there is a video on the PETA website. You can watch what happens, and they went into, I think it's called Rotaba Brothers Meats, and that's in Ohio. I've did a Google Street View of it just to see how big this facility is, and it's not. It's a family operated. They do advertise steaks, hamburgers. They also have pork there. So it's not like they're just producing footballs for the cattle to produce footballs for Wilson. Wilson definitely uses them. I imagine they must have other places that they use as well. PETA is over how the cattle are killed. That they call them sensitive animals. They're group animals. And when a cow was brought in and sees another one of its mates hanging from the ceiling, that shocks it and it distresses it. And of course, the way they kill it, and they're not happy with that either. They do have an argument. It's kind of extraneous, I think, to go to the leagues themselves. Having said that, who else are they going to point at?
Exactly. Wilson's a big name. The CFL, to some degree, is a big name. The NFL certainly is. And that's why they've chosen this path, is that shock value, is the attention that it can garner. The NFL is the biggest professional sports league in North America by a long stretch. So getting that kind of notoriety, that kind of media attention is what they're going for.
Well, you look at the headline on the PETA webpage, and they mention CFL and NFL in the same breath. Photo of an NFL ball and a CFL ball as their sort of backdrop to all of this. The CFL is elevated, at least in this instance, to the level of the NFL in terms of what PETA feels about the situation and what they can do. Now, they do commend some players for being animal rights people. Of course, Brady Oliveira, who is one of the most visible ones. I'm curious to see how this plays out. We haven't had any response from any league yet. And it's more than just these two that use these leather-bound footballs. There are a lot more that use it. They're the two biggest pieces of fruit on the tree. That's why they went after them.
With the World Cup of Soccer set to hit North America next year, games being hosted in Toronto and BC, the Argos and Lions are being displaced due to the scheduling. Toronto has announced that they will play 3 extra away games. They will be technically the home team in Winnipeg, in Saskatchewan, and in Hamilton. The Lions haven't announced their plan as of yet, but likely looking at some other venues to host games for the Lions. Did Toronto do this right, or is this a swing and a miss?
This is a swing and a hit. This is a home run. How else are you going to do it? And I like what they did. And it's something when you and I talked about this potentiality way back, I didn't even countenance that you could play home games in the opposing park. So what you do is you pick the parks that have great revenue streams, and that's Regina, Winnipeg. And you say, look, we're going to play there because we know the audience is going to be big. Interestingly, as a season ticket holder for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, I got to notice that there's going to be 10 games that my season tickets are going to now have to cover for next year. I'm totally fine with it. The carrot that got thrown out is that the Roughriders are going to play a preseason game in Saskatoon at Griffith Stadium, where the University of Saskatchewan Huskies play. First time since 1991. I didn't realize it was that long ago that they'll do that. That's a win-win for everybody. I get to see an extra regular season game. Heck, bring BC here. I'll go to 11. I'm good.
I get a sense the Argos in this situation are looking a bit more at the bottom line than they are on the competitive nature of the team. They've essentially got three of the hardest road stadiums for the Argos to play in that are now going to be their home stadiums. Winnipeg has been really tough at home in Princess Auto Stadium for the last several years. Mosaic Stadium, the Rider fans get fired up. It's a tough place for a road team to play. And of course, you've got the rivalry with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and we know that stadium can be very anti-Argos as well. I get the excitement of having those extra games in these venues that are going to draw large crowds. From a competitive standpoint, the Argos may have been better off looking at some of the U Sports stadiums available to them in Southern Ontario, be it Guelph, Western, York, that would draw more readily available to the Toronto Argonauts faithful, a shorter trip than trying to get out west here to support the home team.
Well, given that this team is probably 6 weeks out of their home stadium, if not maybe 7, depending on how this all plays out, because we don't know how FIFA is reacting to world events right now. The Argonauts, what else? You're saying you could go to maybe Kingston, or they could play at Guelph or something like that. But I don't have a problem at all playing in Winnipeg. And remember, the Argos won 2 of the last 3 going into Winnipeg, or Saskatchewan, where they've beaten the Riders recently. It's not that the Argos are laying over and say, well, okay, we'll just take the pounding, but at least we've got a big audience to watch us. No, they're not going in there to roll over. They're going in there to beat these teams. They can do it. The Argos, we've talked about this, that their defense has just been picked over. Once they get their defense sorted out, that team isn't bad on offense. They're averaging 30 points a game. They might be a fun team to watch next season, especially if Chad Kelly is back at the helm. They might shock everybody and take them all and say, thank you very much.
Anything's possible in the CFL. I agree. I'm just saying that these are some pretty tough places to play. From the logistics standpoint, though, one other thing that does make sense is the broadcast. They're going to CFL stadiums that broadcast games. The infrastructure is there to enable them to do it. The U Sports stadiums, although they are broadcast on different services, you can stream all the U Sport games. It's not the same production level as you see TSN rolling in with their trucks and their multiple cameras and setting it up. So from that perspective, it makes sense to go into existing places where the setup is easy. I'm a bit surprised they're not looking at a Touchdown Atlantic as a possibility in this. They've been a team involved in that for several seasons as well. They've played those home games out east. This is a bit more of a challenge, but certainly doable. And the BC Lions, as I said, have not solidified their plan yet, but they did a Touchdown Pacific in Victoria. They've got possible locations throughout BC where they could host home games as well. Smaller venues than BC Place Stadium, but they're not taking themselves away from BC Lions territory.
I have no problem with the Argos doing what they're doing. And the biggest question to me is, how does the CFL schedule this? Do you put the Argos in a situation where they play a Thursday night in Winnipeg, which would be a home date for Toronto, and then they have to come back the following Sunday and play in Regina? So at least they have time to get home, practice, and then get back for another home date. Or do you play them Friday to Friday or Saturday to Friday and just leave them out west and just go up and down Highway 1 to get those 2 games in? If the Argos go in and win them all, everyone's going to think this is pure genius. If they lose both, but they're close, no one's going to argue about it. And what you want is competitive football. And you're talking about television. I believe it's Dome Productions that does all the groundwork and uses their trucks for TSN broadcasts. They've got 3, I think, or 4 that they run across Canada. They're much more accustomed to being in a professional stadium than they are in a college stadium, because there's more facilities there to connect to. Everything's set up, where you park, how the cables run, everything like that. It's just better built for it. I totally agree that staying within the CFL confines is right. It's happened in the NFL where they've had to move to a different stadium, another pro stadium of a team in the division when roofs collapse, etc. This is not unusual, and this, I think, is a reasoned response. I'm just really curious to see how the BC Lions approach this, because the Argos kind of gobbled up the juicy ones. Now to BC, if they want to play a home day on the road, what do they do?
Exactly. It's not likely they're going to be playing home games at Percival Molson Stadium in Montreal or in Ottawa. They're going to look to find places that work for them. It remains to be seen whether they look at CFL venues. Of course, Calgary and Edmonton being the other two West Division teams. Do they become a home team in one of those stadiums? Or do they look at that Touchdown Pacific facility? Do they look at other options in and around the Vancouver area?
Hi, I'm Adam Rita. We're listening to the Third Down Podcast.
Week 11 saw 4 games of CFL action. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers eked out a home win against the Ottawa Red Blacks. A last-second Sergio Castillo field goal led them to a 30-27 victory. As mentioned earlier, the Red Blacks overcame a 17-point fourth quarter deficit to tie it up late. This does not bode well for the Bombers, who used to be the dominant team in the fourth quarter across the league.
Khalil Pimpleton takes a missed field goal and goes the distance to tie the football game up. The only downside for the Red Blacks is that Winnipeg still has time left to do something with the football, and they managed to do it and make a little bit shorter field goal on the final play of the game. A lot of people are trying to figure out, was it the right call to go after the field goal from that distance? Jason Hogan, could he have, it was third and I believe 2, could he have brought in Strevler and done something different? What do you think on that?
I don't think either fan base is happy with the outcome of this football game. To start with, I think the Red Blacks are disappointed in some of the clock management they had late in their inability to run out the clock. I think Winnipeg made some key errors down the stretch. Now, looking at that second last drive for Winnipeg, it was a 2nd and 3, and they ran Chris Trevler out to try to get the first down. He was stopped short. It became a 3rd and yard and a half to 2 yards, and they decided to trot out Sergio Castillo for a 57-yard field goal. I question the play call of putting Strevler out on a 2nd and 3. First of all, I think you've got to go with your guys. And Grady Oliveira was moving the ball reasonably effectively. Nick Dembski was having a night as well on that offense. You've got to trust those guys more so than putting your short yardage quarterback in for an obvious sneak that the Red Blacks defense was ready for.
And nobody expects, that Castillo was going to miss a 57-yarder. He had been unblemished beyond 50. And that Pimpleton would take it 117 the other way. The two things that you just don't expect to happen. Does it make for a fantastic finish? Absolutely. As a neutral, you're just cheering for everything to happen. But you're right. There is some question about Ottawa and whether they should have thrown on first down or not. But at that moment, I think Ottawa was still playing for the win. If they get that completion, they're going to keep marching down the field and try to win that football game in the final 35 seconds. They run on the next play, realizing that they've got to get some clock out and punt the ball away. Winnipeg does get the ball back with enough time to do something. But I think the bigger problem is on that first play of that drive, Zach Collaros goes 18, 20 yards up the field. Where's the middle linebacker to spy on him?
The middle linebacker doesn't think in a million years Zach Collaros is scampering for 18 yards. But we've seen it a couple of times this season. Collaros has had a few key runs when the defense presents that opportunity to him. He's clearly not the fastest or most agile quarterback in the league, but you give him that much real estate, he knows the situation of the game, what's needed, and he took advantage of it. I agree that was a mistake by the Ottawa Red Blacks defense and their inability to stop him on that scramble. The 57-yard field goal attempt, again, we're looking at it in hindsight. If Castillo nails the 57-yarder, they go up 10. It's a 2-score game, and it's essentially over. I believe Mike O'Shea treats those long field goals as a great if we make it. If we don't, it's like a punt and we pin them deep. However, when you've got the field goal units out, you have a lot of heavier guys on that line to protect from the field goal block than you do on a punt. And Jake Thomas is not running Khalil Pimpleton down. You've got him out there on that line. You've got Gabe Wallace, who's a well over 300-pound offensive lineman out there. You set yourself up to that risk, and a player of the speed and agility of Khalil Pimpleton took full advantage of it. Now you go through the options. They run a play on 3rd and short. They make it. They can run out the clock. They punt. You've got Jemison Sheehan, who can pick directions reasonably well. He pins them deep inside the 10-yard line. It's a long field for the Red Blacks to come back and score. The missed field goal was probably the worst case scenario, and obviously the end result was the worst case scenario because it was a quick 7 for the Red Blacks to tie the game. But Winnipeg stuck with it, got the opportunity to get the ball back, and Castillo did not miss the second time.
Red Blacks really showed that they are coming together. My goodness, though, Drew Brown, a simple play, just running out of the pocket and rolling off to his left and just chucking the ball. As soon as he started to get up, I looked at him and go, uh-oh, something's wrong here. He's not right. It was the same exact thing with Caleb Evans, who was basically putting the brakes on, put his foot into that turf, and suddenly his knee went out, and none of the booth noticed this. I saw it as soon as he tried to get up. He couldn't move. He literally couldn't move. And I thought, oh, he's done. That's it. He's out of here. Same thing with Drew Brown. And again, 2 more quarterbacks out again. It just, when will this attrition stop? Brown goes 12 of 21 for 166 and 1 interception. Dustin Crum, who has to pick up the pieces, he goes 11 of 17, 125, and a touchdown pass. Zach Collaros goes all the way, 24 of 34, 298. He's 2 yards shy of 3. And he has 2 interceptions and 1 touchdown. Again, that interception ratio high for Zach Collaros.
Collaros is a bit of a throwback to the quarterbacks of the 90s. He's not afraid to push it deep. When it hits, it's a huge and exciting play. But he underthrew Nick Dembski on a deep ball by about 1.5 yards. Had he had that much more on the football, Dembski's gone for a score. It's game over. The ball hung up. Collaros underthrew it. Nick Dembski had to wait, and that led to a huge interception for the Red Blacks.
Speaking of Dembski, 6 catches on 9 targets, 128 yards. Again, he is the feature in this Winnipeg offense. And I think if you're picking on the Winnipeg offense and what Jason Hogan is doing, that I think is your problem right there, is that he is so Nick Dembski heavy in his play calling. Him and Brady Oliveira, the 2 of them combined, it's just going to let defenses hone in on what is going on easier. It's working right now. They got away with this one, I think. The Ottawa Red Blacks were in that football game. Even though Winnipeg had them dead to rights for a bit, they still found a way to come back. Ottawa, to me, is if they can get some offense, they are going to be great. And I want to give a huge shout out to Darius Pickett. What a game he had. In fact, even in that final drive, he was coming across the field to cover Nick Dembski, guy who isn't in his area, but he realized what was happening and said, I got to get over here and do something about this.
He did have a great game. They broke it down. TSN did a great job of breaking it down of a zone coverage where he did not care that it was zone coverage. He came all the way across the field to make a huge play, recognizing the significance of it. 7 defensive tackles, 1 special teams tackle, and a tackle for loss. A big night for Pickett, and he is a key part of that Red Blacks defense.
Making a case for defensive MOP. Moving on to Friday night, the Edmonton Elks hosted the Toronto Argonauts. The Elks, with a slow start, but figure out a way to come back into this football game and defeat Toronto in Edmonton. Huge win for the Edmonton Elks. It's their 2nd in a row. Although the stands looked empty, there were almost 17,000 tickets sold, but the weather that night in Edmonton was atrocious. It was almost like they were playing in October. It was plus 12 as a high, and it rained all day, which is great because they've been desperate for rain. But if it's raining all day and it's cold, it's not an incentive to go outside and watch a game.
It's not often we get to talk about an Edmonton Elks win streak, but they're on a 2-game streak right now, and it couldn't come at a better time. They can't afford to lose ground to the other Western teams, so they needed this win in order to keep pace. Cody Fajardo, another great night, 81% completion, 25 for 31 for 273 yards. Not necessarily forcing the ball down the field, but running this offense effectively. Justin Rankin had one of his better nights running the ball as well, 92 yards rushing on 13 carries. That works out to a 7.1 yard average. That's a pretty good way to establish short second down opportunities, and that's exactly what the Edmonton Elks needed.
Rankin also 5 for 5 on catches versus targets for another 87 yards. So Rankin puts up over 170, almost 180 yards of offense for the Elks. That's what people have been harping on. So Jordan Masimic has got to find a way to use him more, get him more touches, and they're figuring this out. Now for Nick Arbuckle, can you blame the guy for what he did? 30 of 42 for a 382 and a touchdown. He almost hit the magic 400-yard mark. He's just been stalwart. The offense is putting up the numbers. The defense just can't keep them ahead. For John Haggerty, that ill-advised attempted pass at the end of the game, when it looked to be like that Niles Morgan was actually turned backwards to him, and he got scared and thought, well, I can't punt this football. So he rolls off to his left and throws a pass that actually gets completed, but it's never, ever going to be a first down. And you saw Ryan Dinwiddie just absolutely abjectly frustrated with him as he came off the field.
This is the most frustrated that we've seen Ryan Dinwiddie in his tenure as a head coach in the CFL. He's blown up at the team. He's called players out. He's called out positions, the entire offensive line. He has reached a boiling point, and the Argos need to start to deliver. We talk about the necessity for the Elks to win this one to keep in it. The Argos are slipping behind in the East, and even with the Red Blacks 1 game ahead, the crossover is a strong possibility right now for a West team coming East, and it's going to be four West teams and 2 East in the playoffs, unless Ottawa and Toronto can get things in gear.
The Argonauts took 8 out of the 10 penalties that were called that night. And that's another thing that you've got to get is more discipline. You've got to be better at what you do when you're doing it. The defense, again, I will argue, is their biggest problem. They are at times looking decent, and at times they're not there. They're just, they struggle. And it's anywhere. It's lack of pressure up front. Sometimes it's the linebacking play. Sometimes it's the defensive secondary. It's something that's just every night there seems to be something not clicking for them. Eventually they're going to get this figured out. I'm sure there's going to be a couple of NFL cuts that are going to come up and help shore them up. And I think that's what they need the most, more pressure from up front, and maybe something in that secondary that will make them more shut down.
Game 3 of the week was the clash of the first place teams, with the Saskatchewan Roughriders hosting the Hamilton Tiger Cats in what should have been the game of the week. The Riders showed up. The Ticats had a tough time getting going in this one, and it was not close from the second quarter on. 29-9 final in this one. All of the offense mustered by the Tiger Cats was 3 field goals.
The Hamilton Tiger Cats started the game. They marched the ball down the field, settled for a field goal. In fact, later in the game, they get a fumble deep in the Rough Riders zone, and they settled for another field goal. It's so odd to see that offense not do anything with the football once they got 20 yards and in, but they didn't. They struggled mightily. For Saskatchewan, that defense is just becoming what Winnipeg was in 2021. They are literally going lights out. They haven't allowed a touchdown now in 2 straight games. They're allowing the fewest touchdowns of any team in the league. That used to be Calgary's prerogative, but now the Rough Riders are right there with them. Hamilton had a chance when this game started. If they'd have scored a touchdown, they may have changed the tone. But by halftime, they were down 19-6. The Riders put it on cruise control in the second half. The Ticats threatened once, but ultimately, Bo Levi Mitchell looked like he was a little bit lost out there. He was getting pounded, 6 sacks.
The Riders' defensive line is elite and are leading this team. Trevor Harris had another great night, 78% completion. He's stringing together numerous games. That's 11 games in a row where his completion rate is above 70%. Again, not a quarterback that forces it deep often. 21 completions for 307 yards and 3 touchdowns was a huge night for Trevor Harris. He gets rid of the ball faster than any other quarterback in the CFL, and that's the key to drive this Roughriders offense, and it allows the defense time to rest, recuperate. We know they rotate lots of defensive linemen through, and that leads to quarterback pressure, and that's what we saw in this one.
And unfortunately for the Roughriders, LeCourte Moore, he's done for the season with knee surgery. So that's one of those cogs in that defensive line that won't be there for the rest of the year. Dante Myers on that touchdown, 58-yarder. There was a bust in the coverage. Both defenders jumped the under route, the route that was running underneath of Myers, and Harris managed to see what they were doing and threw it over the top. Sort of put the nail in the coffin right away. I was surprised in a way that we didn't see a change in quarterback in Hamilton midway through the third quarter, because Bo Levi Mitchell was struggling out there, partly because he's immobile. He's not a running quarterback, and that defense was feasting on him.
The numbers were not great for the Ticats. Taylor Powell did come in late in relief in the final drive. He went 1 for 2 for 5 yards. Bo Levi Mitchell, 16 for 31, 201 yards and 2 interceptions. So hovering right around 50% completion rate for the Ticats isn't going to get it done.
Keyshawn Johnson, another big night, 8 receptions for 117 yards. The Tiger Cats, you're not going to find a lot of great numbers except Kenny Lawler, 3 of 6 for 62. And here's one thing that I thought the Ticats missed. There were several times in this football game, and just based on where I sit in Mosaic, I could see Lawler break clear. It was deep routes, yes, but he was breaking clear. And I'm surprised that the Ticats didn't punch that button a little bit harder and see if they could get the ball down to him, because if he's breaking clear, he's probably gone.
And even in a one-on-one coverage, he's one of the best in the league at coming down with the ball. I believe it was more not allowing Bo Levi Mitchell the time to find him more than anything, because as you mentioned, he was under a lot of pressure for a big part of the evening.
Well, I think it wasn't so much he didn't have the time. They just didn't think they had the time, because the Roughriders were busting through so often that they started to call under routes, trying to throw it quickly so that he wouldn't take the pounding that he did. And they got scared by what Saskatchewan was doing to them. And the Roughriders, as we said, this defense right now is playing elite football. Can they sustain? That's going to be the big question. They've got a massive test against Vernon Adams Jr. coming up, and then they play the Bombers twice in a row. So a lot of litmus tests coming up for that Roughriders team in the next 3 weeks. If they come through that with flying colors, look out.
Rounding out the slate of games, the Montreal Alouettes traveled to the BC Lions. As discussed earlier, quarterback issues for the Alouettes. They were hampered in this one, did not come out on the winning end. The Lions dominated this one. 36-18 was the final. We now see James Morgan as the number 1 quarterback for the Montreal Alouettes for the time being. What are your thoughts on how this one turned out?
It was so unfortunate to see Caleb Evans leave the game early. I thought with him that at least the Alouettes could match up a little bit better, but once he went out, and it took some time for Morgan to get going. He didn't look great in the first couple of drives because he's got to get used to the pace of the play. He's got to get used to guys coming at him, because in practice you can sort of simulate that, but not much. For him, it was a little bit of getting assimilated. Nathan Rourke, yeah, he had a slow start, but once he got going, there was nothing that was going to stop him. He had a big run that basically put that team on his back, and he started to pitch and find receivers anywhere he wanted. He just looked like the Nathan Rourke that we saw a few years ago when he was Captain Canada. Wow, did he have a nice night.
He did 26 for 34, 4 touchdowns, 382 yards, 1 interception. This is that star quality that we expect to see from Nathan Rourke. Only 2 rushes for 31 yards, but one of them, as you mentioned, was a 27-yard scamper that really motivated that team, kept them going. The Lions have found a bit of a run game as well. James Butler, 16 carries for 81 yards, not only finding those receivers downfield, but James Butler is becoming a key part of the offense.
He's really found his home back home in BC. He really was a dynamic addition. He got lost in Hamilton, whatever happened that they didn't feel that he fit into their scheme, but he's certainly happy to come back. Tyler Snead, a great night for him. 5 catches on 8 targets, 111 yards, averaging 22 yards a catch. Not bad for a little guy. The big receiver, of course, for BC, Keon Hatcher, my goodness, 11 catches on 11 targets for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you had him in fantasy, you were laughing.
James Morgan, as you said, a little bit of a slow start. He finished the night 20 for 33, 211 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I think it was a good introduction for him. He did not look that out of place once he got that first series or 2 under his belt. Caleb Evans, 3 for 4 for 32 yards in a what could have been.
That could be the season for the Alouettes. What could have been had everyone been healthy. I don't think they're playing for 2026 yet, but my goodness, how many more hits can this team take?
Third down.
Week 12, 4 games. We start with Winnipeg and Montreal. And as we mentioned in the previous segment, the Blue Bombers are catching the Alouettes at a very good time for the Blue Bombers. The Alouettes, with their 4th quarterback now being dressed and 2 backups that have not played for the Alouettes this season. In fact, haven't played any football this season. Winnipeg, 4.5-point favorite.
Were it not for the injuries facing the Montreal Alouettes, I don't believe the Bombers would be favored at all in this one. The Bombers have been up and down this season. They've blown a couple of 17-point leads late. One of them they hung on to a victory. The other one was a 1-point loss to the Calgary Stampeders. The decimated Alouettes are in tough. I think that Winnipeg is catching them at the right time and will take full advantage of this. It'll be a confidence booster for Winnipeg to go into Montreal and come out with a win if they are able to as well. I like the Bombers to win and beat that 4.5-point spread.
We all remember what happened the last time Winnipeg was in Montreal. That was the end of last season. And incredibly, a windstorm comes up and impacts a punt that would have got Montreal out of trouble, knocks the ball down, and Winnipeg is close enough to go for a game-winning field goal and win the West. Unbelievable sort of set of circumstances. I don't think we have to worry about that this time. But honestly, Winnipeg, granted that their defense isn't doing so well, the Alouettes, though, I don't think are a threat to score more than 20 points. The question for me, can the Alouettes hold the Bombers to under 20 points? If they do, then the Alouettes are going to win this football game. But if Winnipeg gets up to 30, I don't think the Alouettes can keep pace.
And there are key injuries to that Alouettes defense as well, not just the quarterbacks and the offense situation. Ento and Dequoy are some key components in that back end that are not going to be there. This one is, as I said, a very tough test for the Alouettes. And I just don't see them hanging within a touchdown of the Bombers in this one.
It would surprise me if they did. And it might speak more about the Blue Bombers than it does the Alouettes in that circumstance.
Game 2, Friday Night Football. The red-hot Edmonton Elks are in Ottawa to take on the Red Blacks. The road team is a 1.5-point favorite. Is that a bit of a surprise given the Elks season so far?
No, this is about Cody Fajardo taking over as quarterback and settling that offense down, getting it diversified, the work of Jordan McSimic to get Justin Rankin the ball in different ways. The Elks defense is turning the corner. They're starting to play better. I like the Elks on the road in this one. The cover is simple, 1.5 points. It's a pick 'em. That's easy for Edmonton to cover. I'd be surprised that Ottawa wins this one, partly because it's Dustin Crum. He needs some more time this year to play as the starting quarterback. He did one game in Calgary, but that was a horrible weather day. He can't count on that twice. Edmonton is the team that's starting to get it together. Ottawa is close, and they're going to make this game competitive, but I think Edmonton has just got enough to win it. And I put it a lot on the fact that Cody Fajardo has really injected confidence in that offense.
I have to agree with you on this one. I think if it was Drew Brown versus Cody Fajardo, the line probably goes the other way and favors the Red Blacks a little bit. I believe Cody Fajardo has been a stabilizing force on that offense. That'll carry the Elks through. They're going to win it, easily cover a 1.5 spread. I wouldn't be surprised if this one is in that touchdown to 10-point range by the time it's all said and done.
Game 3 early on Saturday, where the BC Lions go to Toronto at BMO Field to take on the Argonauts. The Argonauts are 3.5-point underdogs at home to the Lions. And again, this goes back to the play of Nathan Rourke and the play of Keon Hatcher in that offense. The BC Lions defense is still not up there in the elite status of teams, but they're reasonable. Same thing as the Toronto Argonauts. This game could be an over-under of 60. It wouldn't surprise me because Nick Arbuckle at home can sling it. Nathan Rourke anywhere can sling it. It could be a wild, wild shootout.
I like the ascension of Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions. I believe that they will win this one and cover the 3.5 points. You're right. Nick Arbuckle has put up some big numbers this year as well. The DeMonte Coxie injury is troubling for the Toronto Argonauts. He has been a superstar on that offense. And especially over the last few weeks, he's really amped up his game. That's going to be a key loss for Toronto. Keon Hatcher and James Butler have found a resurgence on offense this year as well. Nathan Rourke is comfortable. He throws for over 350 yards in this one. The Lions win it running away.
Chad Kelly is back at practice with the Argonauts. What does that mean? We don't know how that leg is coming along. I think if you're Ryan Dinwiddie, how do we fix this and work on that? Because it's almost scaremongering when you're saying that someone's going to be cut or that we're not getting enough out of this group and we have pretenders, not dogs, all this sort of stuff. These guys are, for the most part, are giving their best. You just got to start playing to their strengths a little bit and start pumping them up and telling them, hey, okay, I think we turned the corner in Edmonton. I think we're doing better. Found something here. Let's see what we can do against the Lions. You need some positivity. You don't hear that coming out from BC ever. Buck Pierce just doesn't say it at all.
Finishing out the week, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are in Calgary to take on the second place Stampeders. The second week in a row where the Roughriders draw one of the top teams in the league. This one will be a real test to see where they and the Stampeders stand in this West Division. The Riders, with only one loss so far, are a 1.5 favorite at McMahon Stadium. How do you see this one playing out?
Whew. This one should be fun. If I'm the Calgary Stampeders at home, I'm taking the fact that I'm not favored as an insult. The Stampeders, what have they done wrong? And especially with Vernon Adams Jr. as their quarterback, what has he done wrong? Other than that game against Ottawa in Calgary, again, point out, it was a bad weather day. The Stampeders went into Saskatchewan, remember, and took them out. And that was after the game was smoked out the night before. Stampeders didn't even know where they were going to be staying. With all of these distractions, they still went in there and beat the Roughriders. Now, Saskatchewan has to win by 15 or more to win this season series in this context. Boy, that's a tough ask for them to do it on the road in Calgary. If they do, they really are going to show that they are the elite team. That's the team that everybody's got to chase. Do not sleep on the Stampeders. They've been doubted before this year. Even on this podcast, when we were prognosticating, you heard a couple people on this show say that they weren't even part of the conversation in the West. Well, holy cow, are they ever now? This is the game of the week. And for Saskatchewan, think of the schedule. They play top team in the East, then they play the second place team in the West, and then they're going to play their arch rivals back to back. Like, this is murderer's row. And if you come out of this unscathed, wow.
The West could get a whole lot tighter this weekend if the Stampeders manage to knock off the Saskatchewan Roughriders. BC and Winnipeg, I believe, both have winnable games as well. That would push those two to 6 wins. It would push the Stampeders to 7 and hold Saskatchewan at 8. Wow, does that tighten things up? And then you've got the Edmonton Elks coming from behind. I believe they've got a winnable game. That will push them to 4 wins, and they're not that far behind. At the beginning of the season, I was anticipating a tight race. This could be one step closer to that. All that being said, I'm going to throw that out the window. I'm going to say the Saskatchewan Roughriders go into McMahon, pull off the road win, and cover the 1.5. That'll give them a little bit of separation, much needed before that back-to-back against Winnipeg. The Riders are a confident team right now. I believe that confidence will lead them into a very tough place to play and come out with a victory.
Far and away, these are the two best defenses in the league. The Roughriders are giving up just over 20 points a game. Stampeders just over 21 points a game. You think it's going to be low scoring? Might be. Oh, this is two Titans going at it. I'm really looking forward to it. I've doubted on the Riders before. I won't this time. They can beat that spread. I don't think that they can win the season series by winning by 15.
A 15-point spread to reverse that season series is a tall task for the Riders, especially on the road at McMahon Stadium. I agree with you. I think they win the game. They've got to win by more than 2 touchdowns to win the series. That's a real tough test.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.